Okay, we'll make a start. So, hello everyone. Thanks for sparing the time and joining us today. We've got a 1 hour session on version 2. This is a technical webinar, so it's focused on the technical aspects within the new version of HARPS, which is version 2. We've had about 200 people register, and was originally designed as a Q&A forum. Given the number of people, we're actually going to run it in a slightly more structured way, where we've actually got questions from people in advance, and we'll go through those through a series of slides, and we'll take obviously any additional questions that we can answer as well at the end, given the amount of time we have left, and come back to everybody with any questions we haven't got to. So maybe if we start with the introductions, Belle, next slide. So I'm Tristan Kitchener, and together with Belinda Millard, we are the HARPS management team. We operate under a business called One Direction ANZ, which has a operating license from Hort Innovation to manage HARPS on behalf of the major retailers. And we'll be taking you through the presentation today. In addition, we've got 4 of the retailers from the HARPS Retailer Committee who are going to also be doing a bit of presenting and introducing some of the sections. So we got Diane from HelloFresh, we've got Brice from Woolworths, Banu from Aldi, and Jennifer from Coles, and you'll be hearing a bit more from each of those people as we go through. So Belle, maybe next slide and just agenda.
Sure. Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're located. So originally pinned this as a lunch and learn, but realised it's probably brunch for some of you as well, or breakfast. So thanks for joining us today. Just in terms of our agenda for the day, Tristan will just kick off this meeting with a little bit of a background to HARPS, basically how HARPS works, because we know you can read it off our website at any time, but we wanted to provide you with a bit of an explanation of how it's all put together, who are the stakeholders involved in HARPS, why we went to a version 2 standard and how that standard was developed, and you may have played a part in that as well. So after that, we'll go straight into a question that we've been asked more frequently, which is around the version 2 transition timeline. So we'll give you some examples to go through that. Then we'll talk about how to prepare for your version 2 audit, all of the guidance and support that we've provided on the website, and some new information that'll be made available with some collaborative work that we're doing with Freshcare. Some changes to the HARPS standard in terms of formatting and things like that. Some updates on the website. You may have had a good look over it yourself, but obviously good to point out all of the changes that have been made. And then we'll introduce you to the version 2 training providers. So there are 2 new training providers for HARPS version 2 that have been through a process to actually be awarded that business. So they're available to chat to today on the webinar. So we'll introduce you to them. And then finally, we'll go through a couple of questions that we received through the registration process. Okay, over to you, Tristan.
Okay, so we've got a few people today who are new to HARPS. So just to sort of make sure it's clear in regard to the background to HARPS, what is HARPS? So HARPS has been designed to assist with compliance to food safety, trade and legal requirements. And that's an important point to stress, because people often think that HARPS is just around food safety. It's actually broader. It encompasses the legal and trade aspects, and also aims to eliminate multiple audits, so you can supply through to all the major retailers. So that is a combination of the GFSI standards, or the base scheme. So your Freshcare, for example, plus HARPS gives you HARPS approval. And you can see on the right-hand side there, the retailers that are members of HARPS. And some of the things to really focus on is it's around protecting retailer brands. And the elements within HARPS have really come about from issues that the retailers have experienced that come through as customer complaints, DC rejections, withdrawals, recalls. So those trade and legal aspects, it's underweight products, it's products that's got the wrong label on. And essentially, we now have a business model whereby we have all the retailers sitting around one table, all aligned to solve common issues. And it is a retailer-led scheme, because that's what keeps the retailers around the table, knowing that they can ensure the right elements are in the standard that are ultimately going to help protect customers and protect their brands, and ideally reduce the number of customer complaints, rejections, withdrawals, and recalls, which is a cost not only to retailers but also to suppliers. Belle, next slide. So, we've got to start off today really say what's the need for version 2? And version 1 launched in October 2016, so that's 6 years ago since launch, and it was probably 2 years before that when it was in development. So it's really a standard that's about 8 years old. And some of the feedback received around version 1 was there was some ambiguity, duplication. There probably wasn't as much support and guidance in version 1 as we've put out with version 2. And we've certainly seen, there is an ongoing compliance issue around certain areas. So version 2 is around trying to fill those gaps, and also build in new learning that's come about from the GFSI standards and just general insight from whether it's Australia or internationally around trying to get to this position of best practice. Next slide, Belle. So version 2 was developed from a point of view of content. There's a gap was, the gaps were benchmarked against the GFSI standards. So we took BRC, Global Gap, Fresh Care, and SQF, and we looked at the gaps relative to version 1 and where we wanted to go with version 2. We also talked to the retailers about, the issues they were seeing coming through to them, what their pain points were, and then developed elements in line to hopefully solve those pain points. In terms of the testing and validation, there was a public consultation that went out almost 2 years ago. It was and it had about a 6-week consultation period. And since then, there's been a huge number of meetings actually with the technical advisory group, which I'll go into on the next slide. And essentially, we worked with the technical advisory group to help refine the new standards and then get to a position where we got a final draft that went into a series of pilot audits, further level of refinement, and then that's come out with the standard as you see it today. And Belle, if you just do the next slide, please. This just really shows how it was put together from an operating model perspective. So we have a technical advisory group which sits around about 14 to 16 people, and it's anyone as long as they're not a retailer. So there's no retailers on that group, and it's made up of peak industry bodies, tier 1, tier 2 growers, and anyone really who's got some specialist food safety technical knowledge from within the QA supply chain can apply to be a member of that technical advisory group. The technical advisory group decides who gets nominated and put forward to the retailers for then final support for sitting on that advisory group. And we have a rotation system there of a 2-year term, so people can come in and out. You click on, Belle. That technical advisory group essentially works in line with developing recommendations that get fed through to the retailers via one direction, so Belinda and myself. And it's important to stress there that Belinda and I are not the decision makers. We purely facilitate and we pull everything together, but we don't make the final decisions of what's in or out. That is down to the retailers based on the recommendations from the technical advisory group. And that goes through to the HARPS Retailer Committee, which is made up of retailers, but also has the IFPA and the Hawk Council on there, who are in there as an observer capacity. So they can't actually decide what's in or out, but they can observe and they can make comments. And also Hort Innovation. And Hort Innovation takes on a governance and monitoring function, and One Direction reports through to Hort Innovation in line with the management agreement that's in place and the license to operate. And we then have to, comply with a number of KPIs and financial reporting requirements as well. And you put all of that together and it comes out with a HARPS standard. And in addition to the standard, there's a number of other supporting pieces that sits around the standard, such as the website, the database where we hold all the information about audits, the scheme rules and the guidance. And certainly something we've really focused on version 2 is about putting more support and guidance in place. And Belle, you're itching to go to the next slide, so let's go.
Sorry.
Okay, back to you, and you maybe introduce Bruce.
Click. Sorry, I'll be mindful of that. Just before we move on to the first section, which is around the launch date and timelines, I'd like to introduce you to Brice Lamarck. Brice is the category quality manager and covers a lot of categories. I can say there's quite a lot of protein there in addition to fruit and veggies. So Brice, I'll hand over to you if you'd like to have a chat to everyone on the webinar.
Yes, thanks, Belle, and good day, everyone. Why is HARPS important for Woolworths? Well, our customers expect that the fruit and vegetable that they purchase on our shelves are safe to consume and meet the legal requirements set by the Australian authorities. You may remember or not, Ray Morgan awarded Woolworths most trusted brand about a month ago. And that's because we work hard not to disappoint our customers and to put their needs and expectations first. Like WQA in the past, HARPS sets high standards and it's tailored to the Australian industry. This is important to us because whilst the bar is set high, the requirements must be achievable and make sense for fruit and vegetable businesses operating in Australia. We have joined the HARPS program since the commencement in 2012, and we've been an advocate since the start. HARPS is about protecting first the end customer, but eventually the whole industry. Why? Because customers have a whole of system trust for Australian produce, and a breakdown in one section shatters the trust we've all worked so hard to establish and can ignite distrust in the broader industry. But look, HARPS is more than an insurance against withdrawals and recall or an entry ticket to supply large retailers. We think that by implementing and making the most of these standards, by adopting a growth mindset, businesses improve their operating structure at all levels and gain efficiencies as a result. HARPS allows you to start your continuous improvement journey towards excellence. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks, Belle.
Thanks, Brice. No, great words there. So as I mentioned a little earlier on, we received a couple of questions around not so much launch date, but definitely around the transition timeline. So we thought we'd just sort of unpack what these timelines are, what they mean to you as a business, whether you're a tier 1 or a tier 2, or if you're a new supplier to HARPS, or if in fact you're a tier 1 and a tier 2 to the different retailers. So I thought it'd be really, a great opportunity to share these dates with you, and if your audit falls in a specific time of the year, what that means for your business or what you're required to do. So as we all know, the new standard launched on the 17th of October. So it's live now, and we have had a number of businesses actually transitioning already to version 2, which is great. So for tier 1 suppliers, so that means if your business essentially has a contract with one or more of the HARPS participating retailers, and you generally supply directly to the retailers, the version 2 standard actually becomes mandatory 6 months from launch date, which means the 17th of April 2023. For tier 2 suppliers, you actually get a 12-month transition date. So your transition does not become mandatory to version 2 until the 16th of October 2023. So I'll just unpack a couple of examples because we have had some questions about this. So if your business is new to HARPS, if you have been on the journey of implementing the version 1 standards and then you just saw version 2 come in, technically you are supposed to move to version 2 automatically. However, if you've been only working solidly on version 1 and we have that chat, contact me and we can look at an exemption. However, from next year on, absolutely, all new businesses will be working towards the version 2 standard. And as I mentioned, if you're a tier 1 and a tier 2 supplier, you will need to abide by the rule of a 6-month transition. So from April next year, you will be required to move over to version 2. So let's just unpack a couple of examples here. So if you're a tier 2 audit and your next audit that falls due is in December 22, you can actually be audited to version 1 this year. You don't need to transition to version 2 until your next audit, which won't fall until December 2023. If your audit falls in January, if your regular audit cycle for Fresh Care and HARPS or Global Gap and HARPS or whatever the case is January each year, and your audit is now going to take place in January 2023, and you're a tier 2 supplier, again, you don't need to transition over to version 2 till your next audit in 2024, because you have a whole 12 months to transition. If your audit is generally in May each year, you have your May audit to version 1 next year, and it's the following year, 2024, that you'll need to move across to the new version of the standard. So what does it mean for tier 1 suppliers? If your audit, again, fell in December this year, you're one of the lucky ones. You can actually have an audit for version 1 if you want to, and then you'll need to transition to version 2 at your next audit. So not your first audit coming up, but the next one in December 2023. Similarly, if your audit fell in January, you'd be having a version 1 audit this time round, and your next audit would fall to version 2 in 2024. However, if you are someone whose audit falls in May 2023 and a tier 1 supplier, given that cutoff date is the 17th of April 2023, you'd need to move over to version 2 for your next audit in 2023. If you have any questions about the transition timelines, with any question that you've got about version 2, you can always fill in the inquiry form on the HARPS website or give me a call on the 1300 number. Your calls will always come directly through to me, and I'm happy to take you through that. You don't need to do 2 audits. So some people have rang up and said, why do I need to do an audit now and then before the transition timeline becomes mandatory? You absolutely don't. You just stick with your normal audit cycle. The dates are basically just telling you of when you need to transition over to those new timelines. So that was all about transition timelines and the launch date. I'd just like to now introduce you to Jennifer Crawford. Jennifer is the own brand supplier and audit manager for Coles. So Jen, I'll get you to introduce yourself as we lead into the next section.
Hi everyone, thanks for that, Belle. Just to support everything that Breeze said, you know, it's great being part of this group and the collaboration. So I mean, obviously we share in the same standards. So I think for the last 8 years we've been incredibly fortunate and proud to be part of this group and witnessing how effective HARPS has been for our growers and suppliers in Australia. We've also got Brendan Hayes, who's our senior PT, who some of you may know. He sits on the group as well. And I think it's one of those things, just to say, as with all standards, we have to evolve. And, you know, sort of seeing version 2 come to light is great, because it's been quite a few years in the working. But it's taken that length of time, as there has been a lot of feedback, and we've taken all of that feedback and we've included it. So I hope it's something that's appreciated, and I hope it's something that you can all work to, because, as I say, we've got great outcomes at the end of it when people do well, and it's something that we've definitely seen. Thanks, Belle.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks very much. Okay, so I'm sure the majority of you have actually visited our website, where we have basically, this is the single source of the truth. So this is where we have all of our documents located on the website that you can access at any time. They're all downloadable free of charge. So, you know, very, very, very readily accessible for you. So for those that haven't actually been on our website and had a really good look around, all of the new documentation for version 2 actually sits under the document library. So if you just, once you go onto harpsonline.com.au, if you just hover over the growers and suppliers tab and click document library, you're heading in the right direction. So you'll see now in the document library, we have a whole suite of new documents associated obviously with the version 2 standard. So I'm just going to unpack each of these one at a time, just spend a minute on each of them. So essentially you know what each of them means and what value they can bring for your business as well. So first of all, we have the HARPS standard version 2. So this document only includes the elements of the standard. So you'll notice that one of them looks quite big and chunky and one of them is a lot more streamlined. The HARPS standard is simply just the elements, you know, it doesn't actually have the guidance going with it. In this version of the standard, we've actually included the decision graphic up front of the standard as well, and we've included something new called the customer definition. When we launched version 1, I wish we had $1 for every time someone said, but who's my customer? Who's the customer? You're talking about customer, direct, indirect. And this is how we came up with the whole definitions around tier 1 suppliers and tier 2s and tier 3s and what their responsibilities and accountabilities are in this whole HARPS process. So we've also included who the customer is. So we have, that there are tier 2s, there are tier 1s that can be a customer for a tier 2, or you could be a tier 2 that supplies directly to the retail customer as well. And it's important to think about that context in terms of how you actually manage certain elements of the standard that we'll touch on a little bit later. The standard itself also includes, in addition to the elements, which on the bottom right hand side there, you'll see that there's a little bit of a format change in how we've expressed that information as well. We've also got a glossary at the back of the document that talks, we've included a lot more definition around what's in HARPS, some of our jargon or the way that we talk about things, some new definitions as well, like a HARPS practitioner that you'll see through the standard. And the more chunky document that I was referring to is the HARPS Standard version 2 guidance document. So you'll find all of the elements in there as well, all of the documentation that you see in the standard document, but also some guidance. And the guidance there is not auditable. It's the why and the how your business can go about achieving the element. But we understand that not every business is the same. All of the businesses that work in HARPS are very different. That's why it took us so long to come up with a decision graphic, because there are so many different processes that are undertaken and so many different business types for process scope. So the guidance document, as I've mentioned, is just there to offer that guidance in terms of how you can actually meet the element. In addition, we've provided a document that talks about the summary of changes. So you can use this Word document to actually go through and make the changes in your existing version 1 standard. It will help say, this is a new element. This has actually previously been in another section and we've combined these elements. There was a lot of people involved in the process of developing the version 2 standard, and of course, a lot of opinion that went with that said it would make much more sense if you combine these elements or you put it in this order. So this is exactly why there are quite a lot of formatting and order changes that happened in version 2. Another document that we've provided here is the internal audit checklist. So this actually replaces the version 1 pre-assessment document that we had before. You don't have to use this document. It's not mandatory. However, we encourage you to use it. We recommend it because essentially it is every element of the standard turned into a question, and you could go through before your audit and make sure that you're actually complying or non-compliant, put some comments in. A really good tip is perhaps to have this on hand when you're being audited so you can refer to your own notes if an auditor is asking you questions about a specific section of the standard. You could refer to your notes perhaps to provide you more objective evidence of why you comply. As I mentioned earlier on, we're really pleased to say that we're working collaboratively with the team at FreshCare, and we're actually developing streamlined services for growers and businesses that are actually on the FreshCare standards and HARPS. You spoke, we listened. So we're basically combining the FSQ 4.2 elements with the version 2 standard into a high-level document that will provide you with sort of a really quick ready reckoner to see where things are applicable to your business, and also an internal audit document. They're in draft at the moment. We're going to pilot them first and make sure what we've developed is really user-friendly and adds value to you when you're implementing changes in your business. So once we've got them available, we're envisioning sort of, for around the end of the first quarter 2023, we'll make them available to everyone, obviously after we do some tweaking and make them right. And hopefully these documents can create great value and efficiency for your business as well. Okay, it's now my pleasure to introduce you to Banu Aiden, who is the Executive Manager for Quality Assurance at Aldi. Thanks, Banu.
Thank you, Belle. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm the QA manager at Aldi, and like others, Aldi is proud to be part of HARPS from the start, 2016. And we believe HARPS provides continuous assurance in food safety and management systems for fresh produce suppliers to Australian retailers. And it is essential for us, Aldi, to be part of the Harmonised Food Safety Scheme, which provides ongoing guidance and support to our growers and the supply chain. So we acknowledge there is a need for guidance for our growers, and supporting documents that we created are quite detailed and tailored based on the feedback and the questions that we have received from the industry. And tools or templates are linked to the relevant sections in the documents, and this makes it really user-friendly. So we hope you see the benefit as you start using them. Thanks, Belle.
Thanks, Banu. Thanks very much. Okay, so one of the documents I haven't talked about yet in terms of guidance and support is the version 2 scheme rules document. This has also undergone quite a change. So I really encourage you to have a read through it. It's not a really lengthy document, but it's got a lot of really important information that you'll want to know about HARPS. So in addition to the generic sort of information that you'll always see about what product and process scopes are applicable to HARPS, and the GFSI standards that are actually approved for HARPS, we've also included information in there about how your audits are actually stored in the HARPS database, what information is available to the retailers so that they can actually see the outcome of the HARPS audits, and also information about how to select or change your certification body, the audit cycle. We've also modified the corrective action closeout timeframe. This is applicable for version 2. So for version 1, we're still on the same timelines, but we've basically aligned both major and minor non-conformances to 28 days, which really aligns nicely with the GFSI standards as well. There's also information on how to seek an exemption or an extension, which is also on the website. If you have an appeal or a complaint that you'd like to make, there's some advice in there. Also information on how to use the HARPS logo and information on fees surrounding HARPS. What I haven't included in there, and there was actually a lot, and I know this is a really busy slide, so I apologize for that, but something that's really, really important that I wanted to share with you is a question that pops up a lot, and sometimes it's from suppliers, sometimes it's from auditors, but it's really about that exchange of information or agreement between a tier 1 and a tier 2 in terms of what's appropriate to be conducted for the HARPS standard. So at the end of the day, HARPS or the retailers are less concerned about where certain elements get done. Obviously they need to get done, but they want activities to be done at the most appropriate business. So the example we've included in the scheme rules here is things like shelf life testing, particularly for products like those that are going to be ripened. It would be much more sensible to conduct that shelf life testing after the product had been ripened. And that might be at the tier 1 facility rather than the tier 2. So that information is available in the scheme rules. And we also talk about the fact that it should be agreed upon by both parties and it should be documented. An email is sufficient, but something that your auditor can say, okay, how do you manage this particular process? Can I see an agreement if you're a tier 2? Can I see an agreement with your tier 1? What are your responsibilities? What are theirs? If they're managing this process, how often do you get to see the outcome of that particular information as well? So it doesn't mean you abandon all responsibility around that element. It just means that the accountability for it being conducted sits with a specific supplier. And if you've got any questions about that, again, happy to talk to you about it. Where to access guidance and support. Banu really touched on a good point there. Where you can get templates is actually under the growers and supplier tabs. There's a tools and templates tab as well, a page there. So we've created example templates here. They're downloadable, again, free of charge in PDF format or in Excel. I think a couple are in Word. You can just download them. We really encourage you to modify them for your business. So you might actually already have a return to work record or a training matrix or something like that. You might want to just have a look at what we have on our side as well and incorporate a specific component of our template into your current form that you use. So they're just there. You don't have to use them. They're not mandatory, but they are there and accessible if you would like to use them. Just moving on now, this is actually a big change to the training section of our website as well. We've created some transition training videos, so we will be working on them moving forward as well. But the key point around these particular videos was really to provide an explanation of the structural changes. So rather than just having a look at the Word document that compares version 1 and version 2, you can watch these videos instead if you want to. They're very short. They're only like a couple of minutes. I think the longest one is about 4 minutes to go through the whole duration. But it provides information on new elements. It outlines some elements in terms of rewording and clarification, and it really highlights focus areas for implementation as well. And when I say focus areas, really what I'm talking about is things that have tripped people up, things that keep occurring as issues that we're seeing in audit. So we've really sort of pressed some specific points through those videos as well. You can download those to watch as many times as you like, and encourage other people in your business to watch them too if you feel that they need training in a specific area. So that's what they look like. If you go into that section of the standard, you just click on the arrow there, you can watch the video, and like I said, just a couple of minutes. Okay, before we move on to changes to the structure of the standard, I'd like to introduce you to Diane. Diane is from HelloFresh, one of the newer members of the retailer committee, and Diane is the head of food safety and supply management for Australia and New Zealand. Over to you, Diane.
Thanks, Belle. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you might be. As Belle mentioned, HelloFresh is a newer member of the HARPS family. We've only really been part of the retailer group since about 2019. We believe that actively seeking out suppliers who engage in the HARPS scheme has multiple benefits for our customers, really giving that reassurance that we're working in a very, very focused way with an industry relevant food safety standard. Excuse me. We've also seen some really positive outcomes of being part of that retailer-led group in the pre-competition space, to have the opportunity to engage in discussion and in-depth consideration of the standard as we went through the review. I think really enhanced the experience of just working with the group, really diligently looking through all of the changes that we went through for the version 2 review. The HARPS retailer group addressed this process with very common goals in mind. So using factual data to improve the standard really think means that we've assisted the supply partners when they go on their journey to achieving the highest levels of food safety. For future reasons, we really are excited, I think, to see how that pans out really in the industry, seeing how the continual improvements in line with version 2 are really going to improve what we do into the 21st century, because we've got some really, really unique challenges in the food safety space. To go on that journey together, I think, is going to be really, really interesting and exciting coming into the new year for everyone. So thanks, and back to you, Belle.
Thanks, Di. That's great. Absolutely, we'll have our challenges ahead of us, no doubt. We're all prepared now, having gone through COVID. So I just wanted to share with you some changes to the structure of the standard. And these are just, again, little hints and tips that might make life a little bit easier as you're going through the process. At the front of the standard document and the guidance document, you'll see now that we've got a register of the HARPS elements. So if you're looking for a specific area and you're not sure where it sits, you can look through the register, and maybe hopefully those keywords will help trigger where things are at. You'll notice that, well, for me particularly, because I'm working in the standard every day, Section 5 was training, now it's Section 4. So there have been some changes because, you know, the amount of elements and requirements has actually decreased. We've got rid of a couple of sections as well. So there's, you know, it's a much more succinct standard now. So in terms of how the standard's actually been written, you'll have the element number on the left, then the requirement. You'll have the document that's required for that particular element that you'll need to produce. And then you'll see that on the right-hand side, some elements are applicable to Tier 1 only. Some are for Tier 1 and Tier 2. So for Tier 2s, obviously just address the Tier 2 requirements. Underneath that, you'll have the guidance in the guidance document about how it can be achieved. But again, as I mentioned, it's not auditable. The only auditable components are in that dark grey shaded section there. We've also included, as I mentioned, some new definitions. So you'll see some hyperlinks throughout the standard in the blue font there. An example in under 4.1 for training, some new terminology we use for HARPS practitioner. So in the glossary, you'll see that the HARPS practitioner, it's a new definition, is a representative of the organisation that is an employee and who is responsible for managing implementation of HARPS. So there's a couple of those peppered through the standard as well. So I'll just go through a couple of updates to the HARPS website. I'm sure a lot of you have been over the website, but just for those that haven't managed the time or haven't yet sort of embarked on their journey of going through their transition. So obviously on the front page, we've got the new standard there and the new guidance document there, and you can click on those documents and it will take you straight into those new versions. As I showed earlier on, if you go into the document library, you will see all of the new version 2 documents listed on the document library, top of the document library page. But underneath that, you will still see the version 1 standard, the version 1 scheme rules, and the pre-assessment. So if there are businesses that is still using those documents, we'll continue to make them available until after October 2023. Under the FAQ section, we have done a major change. So we've actually created FAQ section headings because we have a lot of questions in there that have been asked of us in the past. So we've created titles for them. You can click on those section headings, go to the question, and hopefully have your answer there. If you don't have your answer, as always, feel free to contact us. A lot of questions have been added to the FAQ because they come directly to the helpline or through the contact page. So we want to make sure that everybody is really clear on not just the technical side of the version 2 standard or version 1, whatever it is, but also how HARPS operates, the fact that we have a complaints process, the fact that we have information about management and ownership and the logo. All of the information is available on our website. It's consolidated in the FAQ to help you find what you need. We also have a modifications to the training section of the website. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the version 2 training videos. That's where you can find those. But we've also included who the version 2 training providers are. So Tristan, did you want to take the lead on introducing Belinda and Andreas to our audience today?
Yeah, sure. So look, just to set the scene, we ran a competitive tender for basically training companies to apply to become approved for delivering HARPS training. And that's obviously because we wanted to ensure there was a right level of rigor and that the content that was going to be delivered was going to be in line with what the retailers wanted delivered. So as part of that process, 2 separate training organisations were approved to deliver HARPS version 2 training. And we thought we'd just take the opportunity today to introduce you to both of those businesses. So maybe, Belle, if you go on to the next slide, and would like to introduce Belinda Wilson-Charteris from Fresh Business Training to say a few words. Belle.
Hi, as Tristan said, thank you. For those that don't know me, I'm Belinda Wilson-Charteris and I'm one part of Fresh Business Training. We're an innovated RTO and we offer fresh training solutions to the fresh food industry to meet retailer and standard requirements. And we also offer customised training packages to meet individual business needs. We offer HACCP, HARPS, Fresh Care and extensive food safety and quality management training courses, as you can see in a variety of methods in classroom and business, self-paced online, via our virtual classroom and also in a hybrid model. All our trainers are qualified food safety and quality management professionals with extensive and current auditing, consulting, program development and or training experience in fresh care, SQF, HACCP, HARPS, across the whole fresh produce supply chain. Obviously, given that, our training courses are very practical because we have trainers working in the industry and they have done so for decades. They're also involved in many committees, industry groups, boards, focusing on strengthening the industry. We've also got the advantage of being affiliated with several supporting businesses in the fresh food safety field, and that keeps us up to date with what the industry trends are. Our training can be tailored to meet our students' needs, including integrated training where more than one course is required. So, for instance, fresh care and HACCP for HARPS, and obviously there's lots of other options. Next slide, Belle. Excellent. As you can see, and as Tristan mentioned, we offer the HARPS version 2 training. That's available in person across all produce markets and in regional areas, obviously based on demand, and that's supported by our hort industry expert trainers and via our trainer-led classroom as well. And the training has been developed by HARPS to enable participants to understand and then implement the new requirements. And we've been fortunate enough to be involved in the development of HARPS through the HARPS Technical Advisory Group. As you can see there too, and we already discussed, we've got a number of other courses for businesses to meet retailer and standard requirements in the fresh food industry. And they've got the HACCP training, HACCP refresher, and we've also got a HACCP introduction course. And so that's for new QA staff and also non-QA staff. So for instance, management staff and business owners, because we're seeing an increasing need, for business owners and senior management to really understand this space. So that's been based on industry feedback. So as you can see there, you can contact us via the HARPS website, the training page there, via our website, which is www.freshtraining.org, or you can see our numbers there, 1300 637 374. Anyone that knows me knows I like a chat, so feel free to call and we can discuss the training needs. Thanks, Belle and Tristan.
Thanks, Belinda. Belle, if you could maybe flick on to the next slide, I'd just like to introduce Andreas Kleber from Quality Associates. And Andreas, over to you to maybe say a few words about what you offer in terms of training and so on.
Thank you very much, Tristan. Yeah, as Tristan mentioned in the introduction, my name is Andreas Kleber. I head up Quality Associates and QA training, and we're really leaders in HARPS and HACCP training. And I don't just say that lightly. We've been involved with the standard for years now, training, but my background goes much further than that, and I chair and I'm director of the Fresh Produce Safety Center, so gain lots of insights from that, as well as many years having practical produce experience. Our trainers are, again, very qualified. They all have to be certified trainers. And so under QA Training, which is a registered training organization, we provide food safety training from HACCP to internal auditing. We do sensory training and those sort of courses as well. But one of our clear focus is training for HARPS. So I've been involved with writing the HARPS course material and supported the HARPS update. And what we've done very deliberately is to tailor our courses to the produce industry. So it's all very relevant and directly useful to people that are participating in our courses. The courses are led by our trainers, and so we have an offer of virtual courses as well as regional courses. And if you go and scan the little QR code on the right there, you can find out more about the courses available now. But we have 2 coming up in December, face-to-face in Melbourne, and also a virtual course. We offer an initial HACCP course as well as refresher courses, and again, they can be integrated with the HARPS course that we deliver. But we're all about simplifying HARPS implementation. It can be quite confusing. There can be lots of questions about it. And so what we're focusing on is really giving practical examples from our own experience. And I've just put up one element, the equipment register, where there are lots of useful tips of how you can actually minimize the amount of work needed to actually implement some of those clauses. We also talk extensively about the focus areas of auditors, because at the end of the day, you want to know what the auditors will be looking for. And so helping address that is really quite an important one. But I don't just want to say about our courses myself. So I've put up a student feedback up here that just tells you a little bit about how they experienced our course. And so that was, the trainer was amazing and made it very engaging and easy to digest the whole way. The training was very practical. I'm very grateful to have had the support and experience of the trainer to assist with some compliance questions. And that's really what we're all about, is supporting you and making your life easier. With that, thank you, Tristan, and I'll hand back to you.
Great, thanks, Andreas. So just to be clear, HARPS version 2 training is not compulsory, but we do recognise there's a number of businesses, as happened with version 1, that did want to take up training specifically. So if you do, please reach out to either Belinda or Andreas. And as a reminder, you know, there are those free videos on the HARPS website, plus a lot of other supporting information, plus obviously the 1300 number if you get stuck. And with that, I think we've got a bit of time left. We've got about sort of 10-12 minutes, so we might just get into a bit more of a Q&A. So Belinda's going to talk us through some of the questions that people have emailed in, and we'll get through as many of these as we can. So back to you, Belinda.
Sure, thanks, Tristan. Okay, so I think we had a question come through the chat, and if we don't get to it today, I'll be mindful to make sure that I come back to you with questions and answers as well. So the first question we received was, if we complete the internal audit checklist that's been provided, essentially, is this enough? Is this going to be enough to actually meet the requirements of the audit? So understanding that the internal audit really needs to be completed without any objectivity. You really need to be impartial when you're completing this document. So think about it in that sense. I'm sure a lot of you know that. Perhaps a lot of you have actually been on an internal auditor course as well. But without that impartiality, you're basically not getting the best out of completing the internal audit. It's really about assessing whether your processes have actually been developed, whether they've been implemented, that should say, and whether that's been done effectively. So the HARPS internal audit has been designed to take all of the elements of the standard and phrase all of those elements into a question to allow the person that's doing, or people that are doing the internal audit, to make an assessment of whether the business actually is compliant or is not compliant. So it's really an opportunity for you to prepare before the audit. It's also an opportunity to improve, to continuously improve with your business. In addition, we've actually included a little guide at the top. So we've basically said if your NC count is 0 to 5, you're doing great. You know, perhaps an internal audit is only required annually, just prior to your external audit. If you have non-compliances that go from perhaps 5 to 10, maybe you want to think about doing the internal audit every 6 months. If you've got between 10 and 20, it's acceptable, but maybe you want to consider doing this more frequently, something like quarterly. And more than 20 non-compliances is really about, you know, drilling down, thinking about the areas that you're not compliant in. Is it about not having documented procedures? Is it about finding foreign objects in your facility? Is it about the implementation? Is it about the mindset within the business that's actually causing these non-compliances? So it really is a good tool for your business to use, and it really helps you to analyze or trend how your business is performing over the year or over the years to see that you're making continuous improvement. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a really good tool for you to have at your audit as well. So if perhaps you're not agreeing with what your audit is saying about a particular section of the standard, it's a good refresher for you on how you assess that component of the standard as well. Okay, so that was that question. Another question we've received is, I'm not really sure I'm understanding how to read the training units of competency under element 4.1. Can you explain how I should be reading this? So I'll just quickly flick over to the table. This is referring to this table that we've got in the guidance section under 4.1. So we have two preferred units of competency. They are, I won't read the codes, apply food safety procedures and participate in a HACCP team. But what we're really trying to achieve with conducting HACCP training or sitting through HACCP training is addressing the 4 key learning objectives. So I'll just go through those now. See at the top of the table along in the bold writing, it's about the principles of HACCP, conducting a risk assessment, implementing HACCP in your workplace, teamwork, good agricultural practice, and hygiene practices. So the 2 green lines there are the units of competency that I mentioned are our preferred units of competency. However, what you need to do is identify whether your training provider actually has a training course that delivers either those 2 units of competency or a combination that actually satisfies all 4 of those key learning objectives. So if you have completed, for example, apply food safety procedures, which is the top line there, which includes the 2 objectives on the right-hand side, but you also decide to develop a HACCP-based food safety plan, which includes the first 2, that is also satisfactory, as long as the combination of units that you select works across the table and puts an X in each of those boxes for those areas. So similarly, you could participate in a HACCP team, which is 3002, and monitor the implementation of quality and food safety systems, which is the 2 units of competency on the right. So you can't necessarily go wrong if you select all 4 of those key areas. But like anything, if you're unsure and you'd like to go through, I contacted this training organisation, they're saying that they've got these units, I'm not really sure about all the codes, can you just help me understand whether A, they're an RTO, B, whether they're actually delivering all the units that would satisfy this training requirement? Absolutely. Just, you can email us, you can fill in an inquiry form, or just give us a call on the 1300 number and we can help you out. Okay, another question that we received was in relation to element 5.12, which is essentially about counting of unused packaging. Now, this is a new element in the standard, and the question was, does this actually apply to the crates and the cardboard cartons that I use or anything around bulk loose packaging? No, it doesn't. It actually applies to pre-packed items, essentially, in terms of what you're using. So that might be things that are in direct contact with the produce, so the film or the bags or the labels that actually sit on those bags. And the whole intention behind this is because we still have a continued increasing trend of mislabeling product, wrong packaging, wrong product going to the wrong customer. All those sorts of activities are still happening. So when people sort of get frustrated over, oh my gosh, now I have to add another layer of compliance over what I'm doing, there's a reason for it. This particular element is designed to try to mitigate these particular mislabeling opportunities that we still continue to see. So again, if you've got specific questions, we had a number of people that couldn't actually get on the webinar today that might have questions as well. Really encourage you to send them through to us. We can have a chat about it. Even if it's mid-audit that you've got questions or you're unsure about what an auditor might be raising and you're not really sure that makes sense in your mind, we're happy to have the chat. So they were the questions. The 1300 number I keep referring to is actually on the screen now. As I mentioned, it comes directly through to me, so you're not necessarily speaking to a retailer or an admin person or anything else. They come directly through to me, so I'll take all of your inquiries. You can email me on the HARPS address there, and we've included all of our direct contacts there as well. I think we have about 4 minutes to go. Tristan, did you want to just wrap up the session with a bit of a summary and some final thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Look, there's a few points here I'll just quickly run through, but just before that, just sort of acknowledge that with version 2, it's been a huge task. It's probably taken 2.5, 3 years to get to this stage now where we've got a final standard out. Obviously, a lot of work from the retailers, but a huge amount also from the technical advisory group. And I think they really need to be recognised for, 30 to 40 2-hour meetings running almost weekly for over, it felt like about a year we went for, where we really went through every element, every word to get it as right as we possibly could. That doesn't mean we'll have it perfect. So we still welcome the feedback and sort of areas we can improve, make clearer, where people may need more guidance and support. And certainly, you know, the idea to do more with Fresh Care is something that we're developing sort of as quickly as we can. But this last slide really just sort of says, well, what's next? What are we looking at next? And where do we see some of the pain points that we could perhaps try and overcome? So the first point is just really helping, particularly tier 2, those smaller growers have less resource. They don't have dedicated QA managers and they're doing sort of 15 plus tasks a day. So really, we want to be working more closely with the peak industry bodies to reach upstream to support those tier 2 and tier 3 growers. We also want to be working more closely with the tier 1s to help them support their tier 2 growers. And I think sometimes where we've seen in the past information hasn't made it through to the tier 2s is that it's, you know, it's got stuck at the tier 1, it hasn't flown on. And obviously, you know, order to capacity, order to competency. So that really means around accuracy and consistency of interpretation of the elements. Hence the big focus on guidance, because we want to make sure that growers get a good audit experience and we put as much efficiency as we possibly can. And we're very conscious as as a HARPS, as a brand, we don't have many touch points with growers directly. They really see HARPS through the auditor. Now, the auditor works as a contractor or is employed by a certification body. We don't really have a lot of control over that interface. What we do want to ensure, though, is the auditor experience is as good as it possibly can, and there's value for money and efficiency there. And then in terms of that piece around closer connection, certainly we have seen in the past that there's been commercial at one side, technical at the other. The businesses that can bring commercial and technical together, we feel actually have better outcomes. They have a better adoption of a positive food safety culture. Ultimately, less customer complaints, less corrective actions, less rejections at distribution centres. So that's something we're looking at as well. Encouraging businesses to put a technical lead on their senior leadership team, and generally encouraging productive relationships across the QA supply chain, where it's less finger pointing and it's more working collaboratively together. And then just finally on the last piece, is just also seeing what we can do to work more closely with Hort Innovation to really ensure we are making fact-based decisions. And that's identifying projects that you know addresses root cause, but is also specific to Australian growing conditions. And I'm thinking there particularly around the use of untreated manures. We can't afford to not make decisions because we don't have perfect data. We're always going to have to make a best informed decision. But if we can actually try and encourage Hort Innovation to channel funding to those issues, it will make our decision making more accurate, more tailored to actual issues that are out there. And then finally, just coming back to where we started today, which was really around leveraging the HARPS business model. We now have all the major retailers in Australia, plus the meal box delivery companies, etc., all sitting around the table. And that's pretty unique. There's no other country in the world that is actually doing that in the same way that we are doing it in Australia. And that means we have an amazing ability to influence decision makings collectively and for common interests to help industry. And ultimately, you know, we want a strong food safety culture in Australia. It's good for domestic supply, but it's also good for brand Australia. So I really encourage you to get in contact with us. Let us know what you think. If you need support, we're here. The 1300 numbers here. The retailers are there as well. And at 1:01, thank you for your time today, and making yourselves available to listen in. Thanks, Belle.
Thanks, everyone. As mentioned, we are recording this session, so we will make it available for people who didn't have the opportunity to participate today. If you would like to provide us with your thoughts, feedback, this was a pretty high-level session today to cover information, but if there's a specific area that you would like us to focus on, particular questions, etc., again, we might even look at a different format so that we can cater to the number of people that are interested in that particular area, if there is something specific you want to talk about. So we really encourage you to use our forms on the website and provide us your feedback on today's session. Thanks very much. Thanks to our retailers and our trainers for joining us today. Thanks, Tristan. We'll sign out now, and thanks again for joining. Thanks.